Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Simply Trade News Roundup. I hope you had a great weekend. It's Monday as you're hearing this. It's Friday for us today. Woohoo! So exciting. Anyways, before we start with the episode, I want to share with you that we're having a sanction updates webinar coming up June 20th with George Thompson. It's going to be 1 hour long and it's $39. Obviously done by Global Training Center. No other than that, right? And we hope you can join us because it's going to be, talking on all the updates that are happening, which it's a lot. And yeah, so we hope you can join us there. We have some great articles. Maybe you have read them already as we have shared them on our LinkedIn beforehand, so you can kind of get a feel of what we're going to talk about. If not, we will explain it to you, whether it's Lalo or Andy. By the way, they're in the studio with me, so say hello. Hi, Andy. Hi, Lalo.
Hey, guys. Hello.
Good morning.
Yeah, so let's get started right in with the first article. So we're talking, basically this article talks on the International Monetary Fund, IMF, that has issued a warning about the increasing divisions between the United States and China and their respective trade blocs, which could have detrimental effects on global economy. Feels like we're always talking on global economy and China, and that is exactly what we're starting with today. Not so great. There's lots of details that you guys can get into, I guess, when you're talking on them or kind of discussing it. So first of all, what do you guys think on this article? Or what's like your analysis?
Well, I can tell you this is published through CNBC, and they were doing a article, basically the effect of the trade war between the U.S. and China. And, basically you have, I'm using that word basically a lot, aren't I?
No, because I'm probably using it. I use it a lot.
Well, you have the two largest economies in the world that are feuding over one, issue or another. Even with the 301 tariffs, China has pretty much full access to the U.S. market. However, the U.S. for U.S. goods does not have full access to the Chinese market, nor does any other country out there. China has not opened up their full economy to do business over there and whatnot. So it's, with things going back and forth, this is just something where it's just the ramifications of continuing on as there is saber rattling, as you would call it, between the U.S. and Chinese governments going back and forth, and people get caught in the crossfire. With that, if the U.S. economy suffers and the Chinese economy suffers, then it's like throwing a pebble in or a rock in a pond. The ripple effect will make its way out.
While the U.S. and China will suffer, I think the low-income countries that kind of depend on these countries, on the U.S. and China, are going to suffer even more. So how can we? I mean, what can we do? I think logistics is a really good industry that can kind of pull it together and, I don't know, help. But or the government, I guess, what can the United States do to kind of recover this already and start on not letting this global economy flop?
I don't know. Obviously what's going to happen or what could fix this is the obvious answer is the U.S. and China are going to have to get along. I mean, really the bottom line, according to this article, the big problem is that the China and the U.S. are at odds with each other. So, because of that, countries are picking sides. It's kind of like in school, this guy is more popular than this other guy, and so they create two little groups, and I'm team X versus team Y, you know what I mean? And you know, they kind of hate each other and everything, but at the same time, the people who are following those two guys or gals or whatever are like, you know, I kind of like the people on the other end, you know, and I kind of want to be friends with them. But if I'm seen with them, you know, bad things happen. All it really takes is for those two groups to the leaders of those groups to work things out, I guess. And I know it's very super simplistic, but I mean, I'm not an economist and I'm not a politician in that sense. So, I mean, I'm being very simplistic in my answer, only because that's the best way I can answer it. It's going to take the U.S. and China to pretty much get along. You know, the problem is there's things that going around all over the world that are creating those conflicts, you know, like Taiwan, for example. I mean, China says it's part of China, you know, and they cannot make them sovereign or independent. You know, they cannot recognize that, you know, and of course there's the war in the Middle East in Gaza, let's just call it that. And then there's also, of course, the war with Russia and Ukraine, you know, so as long as things like that happen, I mean, there's going to be people picking sides, you know, and in this case, it's either I'm Team China or Team USA, you know, and so it gets down to that. So, yeah.
I mean, we talk on this a lot. We talk on China a lot, and there's obviously some like changes here and there, but I think mainly, I mean, there's just feud between. So it's an ongoing fight that we probably will not stop reporting on. I'll do my best to find or to not have them in the news next time.
Well, no, it is what it is. I mean, again,
yeah,
it would be like saying trying to find something where the U.S. is not in the news. You've got the number 1 and 2 economies in the world.
Peloton claims unfair D&D fees, demurrage and detention fees.
Demurrage.
Demurrage. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay, Anik.
Fun fact. This morning I went to the dentist and I was sitting there and obviously it's a German dentist, so I speak German. And she goes, "Oh, you have such a pretty American accent." And then
it's because my tooth is bothering me.
Yeah. And then I'm like, I've gotten this so many times. And then she starts talking and I'm like, "Oh, well, you have a nice accent too. What is it? French?" And she's like, "Oh, no, I'm from did she say South? She said, "I'm from the south of Germany." And I'm like, I didn't know that's what a South German accent sounds like. She sounded French. So,
do they have a twang down there too?
I don't know. It was weird. It was definitely French to me.
Definitely. I mean, different parts of of a country that there's going to be different dialects, and that the same thing in the U.S. Obviously, we have you have a Southern drawl versus a Southwestern twang. In Texas and Arizona and all that, then you've got the Boston accent versus a New Yorker versus Eastern. So I can imagine Germany's same kind of way.
No, and some of them I can't understand. So, I mean, truly, there's no way. Like I can't. And then there's also in Belgium, is it Belgium? Yeah, Belgium, they speak German too. And that's just a crazy. I mean, I can understand it. But when I was at the ICPA, there was someone and I'm like, "Oh, where are you from in Germany?" I don't know. She's like, "I'm from Belgium." I'm like, "Oh my God, that makes so much sense." Wait, did she say No, it's not Belgium. Oh my God.
The Netherlands?
No, they speak German in so many countries. It's actually ridiculous. I didn't know this. What is that? Okay, I can't get to it right now, but I will get to it later. It's gonna go crazy. Okay, well, going back to the company that I like, here we go. Well, I said Peloton, right? So Peloton claims that unfair demurrage. Demurrage. Wow, that unfair demurrage and detention. So D&D from here on out. Okay, fees from Flexport have caused significant financial losses amounting to millions of dollars. You know, that's also a company that is not doing so well. So you're trying to find the loopholes to blame anyone. So Flexport defends the standard industry practices of D&D fees, stating they are necessary to incentivize efficient cargo handling and prevent port congestion. And Flexport, I mean, there are two industries, right? So obviously Peloton has the side where they're like, oh, like, we're not doing so great. We need to like fish for money. And then Flexport has decided, look, this is how it is. Like, this is how we're handling it. These are the fees. So we're going in a battle here, and let's talk about it. So what is your kind of standpoint on this? Because this can happen to any company. Like, let's just be on Flexport's side right now. What can they, how is this going to play out, and what can they do, and maybe to protect them better? Because these allegations, I mean, you don't want those kind of like allegations or claims made against you. So what can companies do to protect themselves in this situation?
Well, let me jump in on that. This is one of those things where when you're preparing your paperwork for an international transaction, I'm talking a shipment, what you want on that paperwork when the shipment is picked up by the carrier on the origin side, whether it's a courier that picks it up, makes inland transportation and tenders it over then to a ocean carrier or air cargo, or whatever, any mode of transportation this works. The objective that you should strive for is that every single thing that is needed should be on that paperwork. The harmonized tariff classification, any special declarations and all that, getting all that information up front so that when it goes through the process, people are not having to look for missing information by pulling it up and looking in a database. Let me classify this after the fact, or after it gets here, or on the way, or whatever, so that when the freight then hits the port, in this case it was ocean, then it's like it's cleared. And so it's moving through, or it's going to be, examined, and it can be done very quickly because you have all the paperwork already there. The problem is a lot of shipments are held up due to missing information. And it's traditionally, a lot of people wait until it arrives physically at a port before they really start working on it. Now, it's gotten a lot better and people are working on it a little bit more in advance. However, in that process, if your shipment's not cleared, it's got to be detained and held somewhere in bond. That's number one. To minimize, so your question is, what can you do to minimize? So this is one of the things you can do. Strive to do everything you can so that when the shipment arrives, it is cleared. And it can go through, whether it's other agencies is involved in all the agencies and customs have cleared it. The second thing, though, is planning things out. Now, planning it out to make sure you have your, I guess a truck driver in this case and all that's picking up the containers. However, if it's not cleared, you can't have a trucker just sitting there waiting on it to be cleared. So that's some of the challenges in this. And then the third thing is, what is the congestion at the port? Generally, you'll have 24 to 48 hours to be able to get your container and then move it on. If it's sitting there longer, then you're going to have the movement and storage of your information, your container of your goods, that is. And so somebody's got to pay for that. Well, that's what happened in this, is that there was so many things going on. I don't know why there was a delay that caused a third-party logistics company to get involved with this. But, again, they're making the accusation against Flexport, but there's more variables in this to really make a comment on it. The point being is, in timing this out, strive to get your paperwork correct. If it's not correct, or if you're missing information, you better be working on it before it arrives so you can get it cleared. and then work with your carriers to get that to where it's streamlined and that you're waiting on the freight, not the freight waiting on to be picked up. The only other thing about this is that in this particular methodology that Peloton is using, they have also filed several complaints against many other carriers in an effort to try and dispute some of the fees they were dealing with, which tells me if they're going across the board, it's almost like a shotgun approach here, and they're looking to see what they can get on some of that. And they're using the FMC, the Federal Maritime Commission, as the venue to file these complaints. So in looking at it, it also may come back to the way Peloton at the time was handling their inventory, their purchasing processes, that the orders, the purchase orders they were doing, extending it and having large volumes shipped when their receiving sites may not have been able to receive it. So that's why another delay in there is that if you've got a carrier, they have a shipment of exercise equipment in this case. Again, this is conjecture. I don't know that if they're going to deliver it and Peloton can't accept it because they don't have any more room in their stores or warehouses or wherever it was going. So that's another thing that comes into play. So Peloton themselves, it sounds to me like they really weren't managing their supply chain effectively in conjunction with their sales and their capability.
Okay. That's interesting.
Well, I think also this has a lot to do with exactly. I think, but I don't think it has to do. In my opinion, I think part of the problem is what you said, Anik, is that the company's not doing so well right now, so they're trying to find ways to recover income, I guess, and just make up wherever they lost. I mean, back in I'm looking at their stock performance here. In January 2021, their stock price was at a little over $170. And as of today, it is a little over $4. So
no way.
I mean,
well, first of all, there's lots of things that happen, aka the Sex and the City big dying. Sorry, this might be a how do you
spoiler
say it?
alert,
like
everybody.
Spoiler. After that, I heard that it dropped. It really did. That's hilarious. But I mean, if you put whatever, so that happened, and then COVID was already before. Definitely spiked during COVID because everyone wanted a bike at home. Like that was like the ultimate.
Well,
thing
that was
for them.
That's why in 2021,
now,
there's in January 2021. I mean, check that out. It's right after it. Yeah, it was right after that, and so, so I think it is. I mean, it's obviously financially driven, but it's like Andy said. I mean, just check your agreements. Well, check your agreements, your contracts. Is everybody else filing this against Flexport? I mean, they cannot be the only one that this is happening to, right? I mean, so something is, I mean, in defense of Flexport, like I said, I mean, they're a big company. They have their contracts and their agreements written out. And I mean, you need to check those. And that's why in trade compliance, you just need to make sure that all your, agreements are correctly negotiated. It's like when you're doing an Incoterm, if you have the wrong Incoterm, something goes bad. Like if your shipment was on that boat leaving Baltimore and it hit and you didn't have the right Incoterm, you might have gotten stuck holding the bag there. I mean, Andy knows that better than anybody. He worked directly with the Incoterms and the two Incoterms, the ICC over in Paris. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. I guess it might be interesting to see what Flexport comes back with because they didn't comment anything on their position on that. So,
well, and there is a legitimate concern or question: is your carrier or your freight forwarder whom you're contracting to handle the movement of your goods, Are they moving slow so that they can charge you more? So, that may be something that it's worthwhile to take a look at. I mean, Peloton as a whole may have a legitimate claim in this case. On the flip side of that, there are so many variables that we don't have enough. This has just scratched the surface that there is a claim on this. But again, in looking at that would be seeing cycle times are important. So when you're looking at contracting with somebody, yeah, your cycle. Yeah, there you go. I hadn't even thought about that. Cycle times are important on every aspect of it. So if you're seeing delays or exceptions or additional fees, find out what part in the supply chain that those are coming from. And then you can look to analyze what's causing that. Is it a lack of information? Is it a lack of planning? Or is it a performance issue? So, good point.
We're in a new era, and this is the sanction era, not Taylor's version, the US's version. So the new era is sanctions, US's version. Again, implications of the national security package on Russia and Iran. So recently, the signed national security package by President Biden has introduced several significant provisions that will have a profound impact on U.S. sanctions policy and international relations. Now, I have to say, we cannot talk on this entire article. It's humongous, and you have to read it. It's very interesting. There's lots of things addressed, such as doubling the statute of limitations for U.S. sanctions violations from 5 to 10 years, authorization for the seizure of frozen Russian assets held in U.S. financial institutions to support Ukraine's reconstruction efforts. So the money that is being seized is going to go to Ukraine. Imposition of additional sanctions on Russia, Iran, and Hamas. So very interesting stuff. But I know you guys have a lot of thoughts on that. So choose a topic because there's so much to cover.
Yeah. So last week we talked about Russia seizing assets from U.S. companies or individuals. I guess it doesn't matter that are in Russia. And now this week we hear this from the U.S. and the Biden administration, whether it was a direct retaliatory or not. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, the fact is that now we're trying to find ways to, well, there's one little piece that I did catch on there. There's a lot of them actually, but there's one little piece that it talked about all the money that was seized, or not necessarily money, but assets and money combined. It's $3 to $4 billion here in the U.S. that is going to be given directly to Ukraine for their rebuilding efforts. I mean, but Andy off camera made a good point. It's like, well, the war's not over yet, so there's no rebuilding yet. So I guess that's still going to stay here in our hands.
Due to certain policies that have been enacted by the administration, the unfortunate is that Russia's economy, who was initially being hurt by some of the sanctions, has been able to circumvent a lot of issues and sanctions. And so they have bolstered their economy by transacting business with Iran and with China, and in particular China. So, the petroleum industry and all that, Russia's and China, China's buying a bunch of Russian petroleum, and that money then is feeding their war machine. So with that, it's unfortunate that this keeps going on. And then, we are talking along with a few other countries, NATO countries as well, that are sending supplies to the Ukraine military. But then we start putting conditions on some of this, or we start putting, we'll give them the weapons, but we don't give them the ammunition and stuff like that. Or we're slow to try and do that. If we're really serious about this war, this could have been done a long time ago and could have been taken care of. But instead, we're just, trying to drag this thing out So that's the unfortunate. The longer it goes, the more it goes in favor of Russia, even with the sanctions.
Since we are limited on time, I'm going to go in with an interesting fact of the day. Well, I hope these articles did you good and, I don't know, was something that you cared about or something that's useful to you, which I think we'd always should be. But anyways, going on to our fun fact of the day. Do you guys know where the word logistics comes from? Okay. What? Yeah, I'm sure no, but logistics. Everything in this industry is like logistics. So it is derived from the 19th century, a French word, logistic, with a QUE. So which means to lodge. So logistic, which means to lodge. It was first used in the book The Art of War by Baron Henry, who was the general in the French army during Napoleon's era. Sorry. Lots of eras today. So that's my fun fact. And I hope you enjoyed it. It's something you can bring up at your dinner table or something. Well, it could be. But we will see you back next week with some new articles. I will try to not have China in there because what the heck? We need some drama. This is boring. Just kidding. We need some action. Give us some. Just kidding. We get enough action. I think everyone should just calm down. And that's what we will do. We will calm down and gonna have a sip of coffee, and we will see you next week. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.